Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! Well, as the public and the press and pundits start to more and more openly discuss the prospect of an active civil war in the United States, I can't help but circle back around to a mysterious individual who identified himself as John Titor, who in the year 2000 claimed to be a time traveler from a future where America was torn apart by a civil war and nearly destroyed by the follow-up World War III that came in the aftermath. But before I get started, I want to thank all of you who support this channel. I made a decision a long time ago to not include ads on my channel and to be funded exclusively by viewers like you. I'm just a humble man that lives in a one-room cabin in the Oklahoma backwoods, and I don't ask for much because I don't require much, but your kind gifts keep my lights on here and literally keep me fed. So things have been skinny around here, things have been tight for a while, and I really need your support. So if you find this content entertaining, interesting, intriguing, or inspirational, please consider becoming a financial donor through the links in the description below to Cash App, to PayPal, and to my post office box. Your kind donations keep this channel on the air and keep me in this seat. So thanks to all of you who already do this, and I encourage you to become a financial supporter of this channel. Okay, so why do I keep circling back to Titor? This is the second coffee talk that included Titor this week. And it's because, you know, something that I talked about in 2017, the possibility that America was facing a civil war nearly almost 9 years ago, be 9 years ago this summer. And, you know, people thought I was crazy back then. People thought that'll never happen. That's so far-fetched. You're out of your mind. Other people accused me of trying to start it just because I was pointing out the conditions were right. And now it seems like everyone's talking about the potential for a civil war. And I keep circling back to this John Titor character because he foretold of a future where America was destroyed by an internal civil war. And in the Titor timeline, it revolved around a disputed election. It was that one half of the country believed that the person who won the election actually rigged the election, and that that the person who had been sworn in was an illegitimate president. Now, we've been living with this reality for some time, and really this story starts clear back in the year 2000. Gonna go back in time. So let's go back 26 years to the election in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2000. And that's a Freudian slip there that will come out later. Here, we'll talk about that, about 2020 in a few minutes. But in 2000, that was the election to decide the president between Al Gore and George Bush Jr. or George W. Bush. And this came down to hanging chads. I don't know how many of you remember that, but before voting machines, we had the little punch card system where you had a perforated card and you'd punch out your choices. And the people that were counting refused to count ballots where the punch was made and obviously the choice was made, but the piece of paper had not fully detached. A piece of paper they called a chad had not fully detached from the ballot, and then they just threw those out and didn't count those as true votes because the punch card didn't get completely punched out, even though the choice was clear. And so this was disputed. It was a big deal. It dominated the news, and ultimately the Supreme Court would get involved, and making a landmark decision would find in favor of George W. Bush campaign, making him president of the United States and sending Al Gore away with sour grapes. I believe that was the first election that was disputed in my lifetime, at least. That before, it was always clear choice. No one ever doubted elections. But starting in that one, we started doubting everything and everyone's motivation to have a true, fair, and open election. And this would be about the same time that John Titor comes on the scene with this story of being from a future America torn apart by civil war. And so now this is back in the news because all of you know that the United States invaded Venezuela, captured Maduro, and brought him back to the United States to face charges. What few others know is that Tulsey Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, went to Venezuela on a mission that has been kept very quiet by the Trump administration. This mission was to uncover whether or not Venezuela had interfered in the 2020 election, electing Joe Biden as president. That many in the MAGA movement always believed that the 2020 election was rigged. And Sidney Powell, who would later plead guilty to election interference, who was one of Trump's lawyers investigating the 2020 election, she would openly and adamantly declare that the voting machines being used were rigged. Now, this is tied to Venezuela, and I'll explain how. So, clear back in 2006, Lou Dobbs did an expose on this voting machine company, who I will not name because they've also sued people for defamation for inferring that they had anything to do with rigged elections. So I will not be naming the company because I'm smart, if you know what I mean, and their retribution might be automatic. So, but yeah, apparently Lou Dobbs did this feature about a company that was, although physically based in Florida, this company had purchased these voting machines that were going to be used, electronic voting machines that are going to be used all over the country in future elections, clear back in 2006. And he brought up the point that even though the company was based in Florida, this company was actually ran by, and all of its employees were living in Venezuela. And that this purchase of this company that in the Venezuelan elections were used to re-elect the dictator Hugo Chavez and later put Maduro into office to begin with, rigging Venezuelan elections. The international community, in fact, was adamant that Maduro was not a legitimate president because he had rigged the elections, presumably using these same machines that were being used in the United States. And you've probably used one yourself. And so Tulsey Gabbard has been on a mission visiting both Puerto Rico as part of the investigation and Venezuela as part of this investigation to get to the bottom of this. Recently, a letter was penned to President Donald Trump by one of the top generals under Maduro. And in this letter, he claimed to have firsthand knowledge of how the Venezuelan government was involved in rigging the 2020 election. So Donald Trump is still trying to challenge the 2020 election. And you know, there's not any like legitimate reason to dig that up as far as trying to undo 2020. You can't undo 2020. The Constitution is clear. Once the election was certified by Congress, it's a done deal. We don't revisit it. And one might argue that this is to prevent future interference by foreign nations to potentially call out these machines that are being used. In my opinion, we ought to have paper ballots and everybody get their thumb dipped in blue like they did in the Iraqi elections after the regime changed there and the death of Saddam Hussein. That shows you can't vote more than once. You stick your thumb in blue dye that don't wear off for days to show that you voted. And I think that kind of basic mechanical voting is what the Constitution intended. It's what the Founding Fathers saw as an election. And the use of these machines that could possibly be hacked, they could possibly be interfered with by cellular phones and computers and Wi-Fi networks and hacked, as it were. And some believe that that's exactly what happened in 2020. As I examine this discussion of civil war, what you may not be aware of, as we are all somewhat in algorithmic bubbles, that we get our news now from the internet and the algorithm decides what we want to hear and feeds us what we want to hear. The left and the right are now getting further and further detached from each other's reality. And so you've got members of the MAGA movement. Well, some stuff's about to erupt around here, so maybe we ought to change it to magma. But the MAGA movement, they firmly believe, and I'm a person who has these leanings as well, although I don't consider myself necessarily part of the MAGA movement. I'm more of a centrist. But I have strong questions about the 2020 election. I believed I saw enough evidence for myself that the election was fraudulent, that I made several videos about it, and I actually wrote a song about it. And all that's gone off my internet channel because I was threatened with being deleted from YouTube if I didn't immediately remove it all, and so I did. And I didn't back it up, didn't save it. But now everybody's talking about it. I guess it's safer now to talk about it because guess what? The members of the left are saying the same thing about the 2024 election. Because you're in a bit of an algorithmic bubble, you may not have seen the dozens, hundreds of videos being produced now by left-wing activists who are calling for the uprising and the overthrowing of the U.S. government. One was just arrested over the ICE issue. He came out in a hoodie that said, "I am Antifa," in Minneapolis just yesterday. That there was a crackdown on all of these people who are making statements seemingly calling for revolution and doing harm to government and federal employees. And so the people on the left who you aren't hearing because of the algorithm more than likely are having open discussions about arming themselves, about preparing themselves, about the physicality, getting in physical shape, putting up the preps that many of us have been putting up for decades. You know, I just pulled some 5-year-old coffee out of my storm shelter. Let's see if it's any good. You know how I dig my coffee. And so these leftists are now openly calling for and encouraging people to prepare for this coming civil war. And I believe it's going to be around, just like Titor said. Whether John Titor was a real time traveler or just a guy who knew the plan, who knew what was being planned by the elites, by the high ups, to keep America crippled and to pull it down from being the greatest nation in the world and bring it low and destroy it from within. Whether or not he was just an insider that knew their plan or was a legitimate time traveler from an alternate future, I have to agree that some of this stuff looks like it's coming true from the Titor timeline. We are in constant conflict over these elections. The people on the left believe that the 2024 election was rigged by Donald Trump and that he's an illegitimate president. And this is what they're saying openly on YouTube. You can step outside your bubble and do a little searching and find these videos where they're encouraging people to buy a gun. Don't, buy 3, buy 30. I don't care. Get training, learn how to use it because it's time. It's time for they're calling for civil war in America from the left. And the right was saying very similar, maybe more more subtle ways of saying it, but they were saying essentially the same thing when Biden won. So it's clear that if there's going to be a civil war in America, it won't probably be over ICE in Minnesota. It probably won't be over disagreements in the political realm or in Congress. It will more likely result from the strong belief on both sides that our election integrity has been compromised. Whether it's the left believing that Russia rigged the 2016 election, or whether it's the right believing that the election was rigged in favor of Biden in 2020, or the strong belief now by members of the leftist side of things that Donald Trump is illegitimate because the 2024 election was compromised. And here we are, 2026, and the crucial midterms are coming up. Rigged elections, time travelers, I don't know. Remember, coffee talk is for stuff I find interesting but don't necessarily believe. Kind of far-fetched on one hand, but if anything the Epstein files taught us is that conspiracy theories might be conspiracy facts, if you want to know the truth. So I don't know. What do you think? But I think it's very clear that if we're going to have a civil war, it's going to be over elections. And when we started using electronic voting machines instead of paper ballots, I think that called into question everyone's belief that we have a true and fair election. Anybody with a phone, a computer, or a smart TV knows how messed up dealing with electronics are and how unreliable they are, whether it's through failure to record votes properly or pure hacking and interference of an intentional nature, or whether it's troll farms in, I don't know, whatever country, whatever Hillary said happened in 2016. There's no doubt that people don't really believe that these elections are legitimate anymore. And then there are those of us that are kind of black-pilled that have always thought that, politicians are selected, not elected. But now, with the elections the way they are, and we've got Donald Trump and his FBI agents executing a warrant on Fulton County, Georgia election centers to pull these documents and try to prove that the 2020 election was illegitimate. And why would Donald Trump do this? Potentially to give him grounds to run for a third term, extenuating circumstances that would, he could argue, would make it valid for him to run again for another term in what is it going to be now? 2028, when that election happens in a couple of years. And there's also a discussion where maybe J.D. Vance runs, and if he wins, he names Donald Trump as his running mate, because it doesn't say you can't be a president for a third term. It just says you can't run for a third term. So maybe that's a loophole they're looking at, where J.D. Vance becomes president and Donald Trump becomes vice president. Then J.D. Vance steps down, making Donald Trump president for a unprecedented third term in modern history, at least. There's also the argument that involvement in some foreign war could cause Donald Trump to be able to suspend the elections, not unlike Zelensky did in the Ukrainian war, or potentially even the civil uprising that we're seeing around ICE. Could the Insurrection Act lead to martial law, preventing a election from occurring, allowing Donald Trump to maintain his power? Well, this is something that the left has been accusing him of from the beginning. He won't step down. Well, he stepped down the first time. Now they're saying he won't step down this time. He's going to run for a third term. And then there's some extremists in the MAGA camp that are like, yeah, let's break every rule and twist everything so we can keep Donald Trump president for life. And all of that, I think, is going to lead up to fulfilling this Titor timeline of a civil war based around elections and based around the belief of election fraud. I'm not going to say one way or the other whether these elections are rigged or not. I will say this, that right wing, left wing, all the same bird, and that maybe Donald Trump was an outsider. I thought Obama was an outsider. Are there any outsiders? If you're allowed to actually get your name on a ballot, maybe you already bent down and kissed the knee of the Illuminati and the New World Order. The knee, I'm being nice there. you feel in the... maybe that's a little further north there where they're kissing. But anyway, trying to keep it PG. But yeah, what do you think? You think Titor was an insider and he knew the plan all along was to cause a breakdown in society and a civil war over these elections, or whether he was actually a time traveler who came back to warn us of future disaster? Is Tulsey Gabbard now being slandered by the left and defamed by the left because they know she's onto something down in Venezuela and Puerto Rico? And why has it been kept so quiet? And could that be the very reason why Donald Trump invaded Venezuela and nabbed Maduro to begin with, was to expose how that foreign nation might have interfered in the 2020 election? And what is the point of that other than to prevent future interference? Maybe it's so Donald Trump can justify a third term. I will say this, if we don't get back to friendly elections, if we don't get the integrity of our elections back, there's going to be a civil war, because nobody wants to answer to someone they believe stole the election. And that's been going on now and bandied about ever since the year 2000 and the hanging Chad incident. So tell me what you think. Are we headed for civil war in America? Is it going to be over something like overreach and tyranny by a federal agency, or is it going to be about elections? And I will say this, these midterms that are coming up are crucial for Donald Trump's administration. If he loses the House of Representatives or the Senate, then we will see political warfare taking place on Capitol Hill, where the people in control will be blocking everything Donald Trump is supposed to be doing, and they might even impeach him again. How many times now? I don't even know. Lost track. But I think there's a general frustration amongst people on the left and on the right that there's no political or legal way to deal with this division, and ultimately we'll just have to fight it out. And then there's the concept that there's going to be a revolution where people on the far right and people on the far left will join together to take down the system and then fight it out with each other over who's going to be in charge once they bring down the beast system together. Dun, dun, dun! Black Panthers and the Three Percenters and Antifa all working together against the government? It could happen. They say, they say politics makes for strange bedfellows. Well, war, you know, an enemy of my enemy is my friend, is an old saying. Tell me what you think. Am I on to something? Do you find all this very interesting? I'm glad I'm observing it from the backwoods of Oklahoma and, safety for now. Do you feel safe? Do you feel like America is falling? Is it all engineered by the elite? Is it two wings to the same bird? Is this all engineered, or is it written in the stars of destiny? All right, we'll see you next time on Coffee Talk. Don't forget to support the channel. I really need your financial gifts and help. Thank you so much.